Section 1 of the Nature of Flatland. I call our world flatland, not because we call it so, but make its nature clear to you, my happy readers, who are privileged to live in space. Imagine a vast sheet of paper on which straight lines, triangles, squares, pentagons, hexagons, and other figures, instead of remaining fixed in their places, move freely about, on or in the surface, but without the power of rising above or sinking below it, very much like shadows, only hard with luminous edges. And you will then have a pretty correct notion of my country and countrymen. Alas, a few years ago, I should have said my universe, but now my mind has been opened to higher views of things. In such a country, you will perceive at once that it is impossible that there should be anything of what you call a solid kind, but I dare say you will suppose that we could at least distinguish by sight triangles, squares, and other figures, moving about as I have described them. On the contrary, we could see nothing of the kind, not at least so as to distinguish one figure from another.
Nothing was visible, nor could be visible to us, except straight lines, and the necessity of this I will speedily demonstrate.
Place a penny on the middle of one of your tables in space, and leaning over it, look down upon it.
It will appear a skull. Sentence number 8.
Press that. But now drawing back to the edge of the table, gradually lower your eye, springing yourself more and more into the condition of the inhabitants of flatland, and you will find the penny becoming more and more oval to your view. And at last, when you've placed your eye exactly on the edge of the table, so that you are, as it were, actually a flatlander, the penny will then have ceased to appear oval at all, and will have become, so far as you can see, a straight line.
The same thing would happen if you were to treat in the same way a triangle or a square or any other figure cut out from pasteboard.
As soon as you look at it with your eye on the edge of the table, you will find that it ceases to appear to you as a figure, and that it becomes in appearance a straight line.
2, 3.
Take for
For
example,
an
an
equilateral
triangle
who represents with us a tradesman of the respectable class.
Period.
What are you recording? When I was in Spaceland, I heard that your sailors have very similar experiences while they traverse your seas and discern some distant island or coast laying on the horizon.
Far off land may have bays, shorelands, angles in and out to any number and extent, but at a distance you see none of these, unless indeed your sun shines bright upon them, revealing the projections and retirements by means of light shade, nothing but a gray, unbroken line upon the water. Well, that is just what we see when one of our triangles or other acquaintances comes towards us in the flatland. As there is neither sun with us nor any light of such a kind as to make shadows, we have none of the helps of the sight that you have in spaceland.
If our friend comes closer to us, we see his line becomes larger. If he leaves us, it becomes smaller. But still he looks like a straight line. Be he a triangle, square, pentagon, hexagon, circle, what you will. A straight line he looks and nothing else.
You may perhaps ask how under these disadvantaged circumstances we are able to distinguish our friends from one another. But the answer to this very natural question will be more fully and easily given when I come to describe the inhabitants of Flatland.
Hi. Hello. I like the houses in the non-country because, well, they're very nice. I have no idea what the houses in Flatland look like. Yes. There will be no sun nor other heavenly bodies, it is impossible for us to determine the north in its usual way, but we have a method of our own.
Girl, what happens? Oh, shit.
Should we do it at the same time? By law of nature with us, there is a constant attraction to the south. And, although in temperate climates this is very slight, so that even a woman in reasonable health can journey several furlongs northward without much difficulty, yet the hampering effort of the southward attraction is quite sufficient to serve as a compass in most parts of our earth.
I'll read it out loud. Yeah. Moreover, the rain, which falls at stated intervals, coming always from the north, is an additional assistance. And in the towns, we guidance of the houses, which of course have their side walls running for the most part north and south, so that the roofs may keep off the rain from the north. In the country, where there are no houses, the trunks of the trees serve as some sort of guide. Altogether, we have not so much difficulty as might be expected in determining our bearing.
Yet in our more temperate regions in which the southward attraction is hardly felt, walking sometimes in a perfectly desolate plain, where there have been no houses nor trees to guide me, I have been occasionally compelled to remain stationary for hours together, waiting till the rain came before continuing my journey.
Windows, there are none in our houses, for the light comes to us alike in our homes and out of them, by day and by night equally at all times, and in all places, whence we now know not.
It was in the old days, with our learned men, an interesting and oft investigate question: what is the origin of light?
And the solution of it has been repeatedly attempted, with no other result than to crowd our lunatic asylum with the would-be solvers.
Hence, after fruitless attempts to suppress such investigations indirectly by making them liable to a heavy tax, the legislature, in comparatively recent times, absolutely prohibited them.
Alas, I alone in Flatland, know now only too well the true solution of this mysterious problem. My knowledge cannot be made intelligible to a single one of my countrymen, and I am mocked at. I, the sole possessor of the truths of space and of the theory of the introduction of light from the world of 3 dimensions, as if I were the maddest of the mad.
But a truce to these painful digressions. Let me return to our home.
The most common form for the construction of a house is five-sided or pentagonal, as in the annexed figure.
The 2 northern sides RO-OF constitute the roof, and for the most part have no doors. On the east is a small door for the women, on the west a much larger one for men. The south side, all 4, is usually doorless.
Square and triangular houses are not allowed, and for this reason.
is only now and then in this very remote and backward agricultural district that an aquarian may still discover a square house. Section 3, concerning the inhabitants of Flatland.
The greatest length or breadth of a full-grown inhabitant of Flatland may be estimated at about 11 of your inches.
12 inches may be regarded as a maximum.
Our women are straight lines. Our soldiers and lowest class of workmen are triangles with 2 equal sides, each about 11 inches long, and a base of or third side so short, often not exceeding half an inch, that they form at their vertices a very sharp and formidable angle. Indeed, when the bases are of the most degraded type, not more than 1/8 part of an inch in size, they can hardly be distinguished from straight lines or women, so extremely pointed are their vertices. With us, as view, these triangles are distinguished from others by being called isosceles, and by this name I shall refer to them in the following pages.
Our middle class consists of equilateral or equal-sided triangles.
Our professional men in general are squares, to which class I myself belong, and 5-sided figures or pentagons.
Next above these come the nobility, of whom there are several degrees, beginning at 6-sided figures or hectagons, and from thence rising in the number of their sides till they receive the honorable title of polygonal or many-sided.
Nobility and development of scale D in step 1 rule A as rise shall generation each that so father his then side more one have shall child male A that us with nature of law A is it.
This is a sentence and a thing, and while we're doing the sentence, you know.
You're not doing this right.
I'm doing a sentence. Stop, let's stop.
I press. That's a really long sentence.
I'm playing on Skype.
Is that what that is?
Is this thing on? But press it. Press record. But you haven't pressed record.
No, it says recording
is
right
it
there.
Recording?
That big red bit.
But I can't see them. Can they see me?
I don't think they can see you.
Alex, can you see me?
Is that a...
How's little Jimmy?
With them, therefore, the law of nature does not hold, and the son of an isosceles, i.e. a triangle with 2 sides equal, remains isosceles still.
Nevertheless, all hope is not such out, even from the isosceles, that his posterity may ultimately rise above his degraded condition.
For after a long series of military successes, or diligent and skillful laborers, it is generally found that the more intelligent among the artisans and soldier classes manifest a slight increase of their third side or base, and a shrinkage of the other 2 sides. Intermarriages arranged by the priests between the sons and daughters of these more intellectual members of the lower classes generally result in an offspring approximately still more to the type of the equal-sided triangle.
I don't fucking care. When you want me to say it, I'm not gonna fucking...
Such a birth requires, as its antecedents, not only a series of carefully arranged intermarriages, but all a long continued exercise of frugality and self-control on the part of the would-be ancestors of the coming equilateral, and a patient, systematic, and continuous development of the isosceles intellect through many generations.
The birth of a true equilateral triangle from isosceles parents is the subject of rejoicing in our country for many furlongs round. After a strict examination conducted by the Sanitary and Social Board, the infant, if certified as regular, is with solemn ceremonial admitted into the class of equilaterals. He is then immediately taken from his proud yet sorrowing parents and adopted by some child equilateral, who is bound by oath never to permit the child henceforth to enter his former home, or so much as to look upon his relations again, for fear lest the freshly developed organism may, by force of unconscious imitation, fall back again into his hereditary level. The occasional emergence of an equilateral from the ranks of his self-born ancestors is welcomed, not only by the poor selves themselves, as a gleam of light and hope shed upon the monotonous squalor of their existence, but also by the aristocracy at large, for all the higher classes are well aware that these rare phenomena, while they do little or nothing to vulgarize their own privileges, serve as almost useful barrier against revolution from below. Had the acute-angled rabble been all, without exception, absolutely destitute of hope and of ambition, they might have found leaders in some of their many seditious outbreaks, so able as to render their superior numbers and strength due, much even for the wisdom of these peoples. But a wise ordinance of nature has decreed that in proportion as the working classes increase in intelligence, knowledge, and all virtue, in that same proportion their acute angle, which makes them physically terrible, shall increase also and approximate their comparatively harmless angle of the equilateral triangle. Thus, in the most brutal and formidable off-the-soldier class, creatures almost on all level, with women in their lack of intelligence, it is found that, as they wax in the mental ability necessary to employ their tremendous penetrating power to advantage, so do they wane in the power of penetration itself. How admirable is the law of compensation, and how perfect a proof of the natural fitness, and I may almost say, the divine origin of the aristocratic constitution of the states of Flatland. By a judicious use of this law of nature, the polygons and circles are almost always able to stifle sedition in its very cradle, taking advantage of the irrepressible and boundless hopefulness of the human mind. Art also comes to the aid of law and order. It is generally found possible by a little artificial compression or expansion on the part of the state positions to make some of the more intelligent leaders of a rebellion perfectly regular, and to admit them at once into the privileged classes, a much larger number, who are still below the standard, allured by the prospect of being ultimately ennobled, are induced to enter the state hospitals, where they are kept in honorable confinement for life. One or two alone of the most obstinate, foolish, and helplessly irregular are led to execution. Then the wretched rabble of the isosceles, planless and leaderless, are either transfixed without resistance by the small body of their brethren, whom the chief circle keeps in pay for emergencies of this kind, or else more often, by means of jealousies and suspicious skillfully fomented among them by the circular party, they are stirred to mutual warfare and perish by one another. No less than 120 rebellions are recorded in our annals, besides minor outbreaks numbered at 235, and they have all. Footnote 1. What need of a certificate? A spaceland critic may ask, is not the procreation of a square son a certificate from nature herself, proving the equal sideness of the father? I reply that no lady of any position will marry an uncertified triangle.
Square offspring has sometimes resulted from a slightly irregular triangle, but in almost every such case the irregularity of the first generation is visited on the third, which either fails to attain the pentagonal rank or relapses to the triangular. Section 4, concerning the women.
If our highly pointed triangles of the soldier class are formidable, it may be readily inferred that far more formidable are our women. 4. If a soldier is a wedge, a woman is a needle, being, so to speak, all point at least the same to extremity.
But here, perhaps some of my younger readers may ask how a woman in Flatland can make herself invisible.
I think I'm supposed to read this. However, a few words will make it clear to the most unreflecting.
Place a needle on the table. Then, with your eye on the level of the table, look at it sideways, and you see the whole length of it. But look at it endways, and you see nothing but a point. It has become practically invisible. First time it takes a second. Just so is it with one of our women. Wow, that was weird.
Record this one. When her sight is turned toward us, we see her as a straight line. When the end containing her eye or mouth, for us these two organs are identical, is the part that meets our eye, then we see nothing but a highly lustrous point. But when the back is presented to our view, then, being only sublustrous and, indeed, almost as dim as an inanimate object, her hinder extremity serves her as a kind of invisible cap.
The dangers to which we are exposed from our women must now be manifest to the meanest capacity of spaceland.
I want to look at that book with you. And when a woman is invisible or visible only as a dim sub-lustrous point, how difficult must it be, even for the most cautious, always to avoid collision? Many are the enactments made at different times in the different states of Flatland in order to minimize this peril. In the southern and less temperate climates, where the force of gravitation is greater and human beings liable to casual and involuntary motions, the laws concerning women are naturally much more stringent. But a general view of the code may be obtained from the following summary. Number 1.
Every house shall have one entrance on the eastern side, for the use of females only, by which all females shall enter in a becoming and respectful manner. Footnote 1. And not by the men's western door. No female shall walk in any public place without continually keeping up her peace cry, under penalty of death. 3.
Any female duly certified to be suffering from St.
In some of the states, there is an additional law forbidding females under penalty of death from walking or standing in any public place without moving their backs constantly from left to right, so as to indicate their presence to those behind them. Others oblige women, when traveling, to be followed by one of her sons or servants, or by her husband. Others confine women altogether in their houses, except during the religious festivals.
But it has been found by the wisest of our circles or statesmen that the multiplication of restrictions on females tends not only to the debilitation and diminution of the race, but also to the increase of domestic murders to such an extent that a state loses more than it gains by a too prohibitive code.
After all, our principal safeguard is found not in legislature, but in the interests of the women themselves. For although they can inflict instantaneous death by a retrograde movement, yet unless they can at once disengage their stinging extremity from the struggling body of the victim, their own frail bodies are liable to be shattered. The power of fashion is also on our side. I pointed out that in some less civilized states, no female is suffered to stand in a public place without swaying her back from right to left. This practice has been universal among ladies of any pretensions to breeding in all well-governed states, as far back as the memory of figures can reach. It is considered a disgrace to any state that legislation should have to enforce what ought to be, and is in every respectable female a natural instinct. The rhythmical, and, if I may say so, well-modulated undulation of the back in Our Ladies of circular rank is envied and imitated by the wife of a common equilateral, who can achieve nothing beyond a mere monotonous swing. The ticking of a pendulum and the regular tick of the equilateral is no less admired and copied by the wife of the progressive and inspiring isosceles. In the females whose family no back motion of any kind has become as yet a necessity of life. Hence, in every family of position and consideration, back motion is as prevalent as time itself, and the husbands and sons in these households enjoy immunity at least from invisible attacks. Not that it must be for a moment supposed that our women are destitute, but unfortunately the passion of the moment predominates in the frail sex over every other consideration. This is, of course, a necessity arising from their unfortunate conformation. For as they have no pretensions to an angle, being inferior in this respect to the very lowest of the isosceles, they are consequently wholly devoid of brain power, and have neither reflection, judgment, nor forethought, and hardly any memory. Hence, in their fits of fury, they remember no claims and recognize no distinctions. I have actually known a case where a woman has exterminated her whole household, and half an hour afterwards, when her rage was over and the fragments swept away, has asked what has become of her husband and children. Obviously, then, a woman is not to be irritated as long as she is in a position where she can turn round. When you have them in their apartments, which are constructed with a view to denying them that power, you can say and do what you like, for they are then wholly impotent for mischief, and will not remember a few minutes hence the incident for which they may be at this moment threatening you with death, nor the promises which you may have found it necessary to take in order to pacify their fury. On the whole, we got on pretty smoothly in our domestic relations, except in the lower strata and military classes. The want of tact and discretion on the part of the husbands produces at times indescribable disasters. Relying too much on the offensive weapons of their good angles instead of the defensive organs of good sense and seasonal simulations, these reckless creatures too often neglect the prescribed construction of the women's apartments, or irritated their wives by ill-advised expressions out of doors which they refuse immediately to retract. Moreover, a blunt and stolid regard for literal truth indisposes them to make those lavish promises by which the more judicious circle can in a moment pacify his consort. The result is massacre, not however without its advantages, as it eliminates the more brutal and troublesome of the isosceles, and by many of our circles, the destructiveness of the thinner sex is regarded as one among many providential arrangements of suppressing redundant population and nipping revolution in the bud. Yet, even in our best regulated, most approximately circular families, I cannot say that the ideal of family life is so high as with you in Spaceland. There is peace insofar as the absence of slaughter may be called by that name, but there is necessarily little harmony of tastes or pursuits, and the cautious wisdom of the circles has ensured safety at cost of domestic comfort. In every circular or polygonal household, it has been a habit from time immemorial, and now has become a kind of instinct among the women of our higher classes, that the mothers and daughters should constantly keep their eyes and mouths towards their husband and his male friends. And for a lady in a family of distinction to turn her back upon her husband would be regarded as a kind of portent involving loss of status. But, as I shall soon shew, this custom, though it has been the advantage of safety, is not without disadvantages. In the houses of the working man, respectable tradesman, where the wife is allowed to turn her back upon her husband while pursuing her household avocations, there are at least intervals of quiet when the wife is not seen nor heard, except for the humming sound of the continuous peace cry. But in the homes of the upper classes there is too often no peace. There the voluble mouth and bright penetrating eye are ever directed toward the master of the household, and light itself is not more persistent than the stream of feminine discourse. The tact and skill which suffice to avert a woman's sting are unequal to the task of stopping a woman's mouth, and as the wife has absolutely nothing to say, and absolutely no constraint of wit, sense, or conscience to prevent her from saying it, not a few cynics have been found to aver that they prefer the danger of a death-dealing but inaudible sting to the safe, sonorous of a woman's other end. To my readers in Spaceland, the condition of our women may seem truly deplorable, and so indeed it is. A male of the lowest type of the isosceles may look forward to some improvement of his angle and to the ultimate elevation of the whole of his degraded caste, but no woman can entertain such hopes for her sex. Once a woman, always a woman, is a decree of nature, and the very laws of evolution seem suspended in her disfavor. Yet at least we can admire the wise prearrangement which has ordained that as they have no hopes, so they shall have no memory to recall, no forethought to anticipate the miseries and humiliations which are at once the necessity of their existence and the basis of the constitution of Flatland. Section 5 of our methods of recognizing one another. You, who are blessed with shade, as well as love. You, who are gifted with two eyes, endowed with a knowledge of perspective and charmed with the enjoyment of various colors. You, who can actually see an angle and contemplate the complete circumference of a circle in the half region of 3 dimensions. How shall I make it clear to you the extreme difficulty which we in Flatland experience in recognizing one another's configuration? Recall what I told you above. All beings in Flatland, animate and inanimate, no matter what the form, present to our view the same, or nearly the same appearance, viz. That of a straight line. How then can one be distinguished from another where all appear the same? The answer is threefold. The first means of recognition is the sense of hearing, which with us is far more highly developed than with few, and which enables us not only to distinguish by the voice of our personal friends, but even to discriminate between different classes, at least so far as concerns the 3 lowest orders, the equilateral, the square, and the pentagon. For the isosceles I take no account. But as we ascend the social scale, the process of discriminating and being discriminated by hearing increases in difficulty, partly because voices are assimilated, partly because the faculty of discrimination is a plebeian virtue not much developed among the aristocracy. And wherever there is any danger of imposture, we cannot trust to this method. Amongst our lowest orders, the vocal organs are developed to a degree more than correspondent with those of hearing, so that an isosceles can easily feign the voice of a polygon, and, with some training, that of a circle himself. A second method is therefore more commonly resorted to. Feeling is, among our women and lower classes. About our upper classes I shall speak plainly. The principal test of recognition at all events between strangers, and when the question is not as to the individual but as to the class. What therefore introduction is among the higher classes in Spaceland, the process of feeling with us. Permit me to ask you to feel and be felt by my friend, Mr. So-and-so, is still among the more old-fashioned of our country gentlemen in districts remote from towns. Customary for a Flatland introduction. But in the towns and among men of business, the words "be felt by" are omitted and the sentence is abbreviated to "Let me ask you to feel Mr. So-and-so," although it is assumed, of course, that the feeling is the reciprocal.
Oh, I didn't know it turned blue. Maybe I'll wait for it to turn blue. You're welcome. Anytime, seriously. Anytime. It is. It's all you got.
Jones.
Let not my reader, however, suppose that feeling is with us the tedious process that it would be with you, or that we find it necessary to feel right round all the sides of every individual before we determine the class to which he belongs.
Long practice and training, begun in the schools and continued in the experience of daily life, enable us to discriminate at once by the sense of touch between the angles of an equal-sided triangle, square, and pentagon. And I need not say that the brainless vertex of an acute angled isosceles is obvious to the dullest touch. First, it's always a little, because it has to start up the, hold on, let's give it a second.
This is a nice touch. Full circle and square.
Is it?
Is it still recording?
No, it should be stopped.
Stop again. This is all part of the experiment, isn't it?
Should be fine.
Hamster spinning the wheel fast enough.
I don't know what's going on. How long has this program been running? Who's the person that's singing? It is therefore not necessary, as a rule, to do more than feel a single angle of an individual, and this, once ascertained, tells us the class of the person whom we are discussing, unless indeed he belongs to the higher section of the nobility. Oh, seriously. It's weird. I should restart the whole computer. I don't know when the last time we restarted it was. There, the difficulty is much greater. Even a Master of Arts in the University of Wentbridge has been known to confuse a 10-sided with a 12-sided polygon, and there is hardly a doctor of science in or out of that famous university who could pretend to decide promptly and unhesitatingly between a 20-sided and 24-sided member of the
Those of my readers who recall the extracts I gave above from the legislative code concerning women will readily perceive that the process of introduction by contact requires some care and discretion.
Otherwise, the angels might inflict on the unwary feeling irreparable injury.
It is essential for the safety of the feeler that the felt should stand perfectly still.
A start, a fidgety shifting of the position, yes, even a violent sneeze, has been known before now to prove fatal to the incautious, and to nip in the bud many a promising friendship.
Dit is speciaal waar en vooral onder de lagere klassen van de driehoeken. Dank u wel en goede avond.
With them the eye is situated so far from their vertex that they can scarcely take cognizance of what goes on at that extremity of their frame. They are moreover of a rough coarse nature, not sensitive to the delicate touch of the highly organized polygon. What wonder then if an involuntary toss of the head has ere now deprived the state of a valuable life?
I've heard that my excellent grandfather, one of the least irregular of his unhappy isosceles class, who indeed obtained, shortly before his decease, 4 out of 7 votes from the Sanitary and Social Board for passing him into the class of the equal-sided, often deplored, with a tear in his venerable eye, a miscarriage of this kind, which had occurred to his great-great-great-grandfather, a respectable working man with an angle or brain of 59 degrees, 3 minutes.
Yum, 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 yum. Thank you very much.
At this point, I think I hear some of my better educated readers exclaim, "How could you in Flatland know anything about angles and degrees or minutes?"
We see an angel, comma, because we, comma, in the region of space, comma, can see 2 straight lines inclined to one another. But you, who can see nothing but one straight line at a time, comma, or at all events only number of bits of straight lines, all in one straight line, comma, dash, dash. How can you ever discern an angle, much less register angles of different sizes?
blah 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 blah.
Oh, look, who's that?
Nor must I omit to explain that we have great natural helps.
Consequently, nature itself supplies us with an ascending scale or alphabet of angles for half a degree up to 60 degrees, specimens of which are placed in every elementary school throughout the land.
Owing to occasional retrogressions, to still more frequent moral and intellectual stagnation, and to the extraordinary fecundity of the criminal and vagabond classes, there is always a past superfluity of individuals of the half-degree and single-degree class, and a fair abundance of specimens up to 10 degrees.
Cool.
Fettered immovably so as to remove all possibility of danger, they are placed in the classrooms of our infant schools, and they are utilized by the Board of Education for the purpose of imparting to the offspring of the middle classes the tact and intelligence which these wretched creatures themselves are utterly devoid.
Stop.
What are you doing? In some states, the specimens are occasionally fed.
Nor must we forget to add, in enumerating the advantages of the more expensive system, that it tends, though slightly yet perceptibly, to the diminution of the redundant cost of this population, an object which every statesman in Flatland constantly keeps in view.
On the whole, therefore, although I am not ignorant that in many popularly elected school boards there is a reaction in favor of the cheap system, as it is called, I am myself disposed to think that this is one of the many cases in which expense is the truest economy. But I must not allow questions of school board politics to divert me from my subject. Enough has been said, I trust, to shew that recognition by feeling is not so tedious or incisive a process as might have been supposed, and it is obviously more trustworthy than recognition by hearing. Still, there remains, as has been pointed out above, the objection that this method is not without danger. For this reason, many in the middle and lower classes, and all without exception, the political and superior, prefer for the description which shall be observed next section. Section 6 of recognition by sight. I didn't want to say that. I'm going to have a smoke in a second. I'll give you 3 more chances. 1, 2, 3.
But let me explain my meaning without further eulogies in this beneficent element. If fog were non-existent, all lines would appear equally, indistinguishably clear, and this is actually the case in those unhappy countries in which the atmosphere is perfectly dry and transparent. But wherever there is a rich supply of fog, objects that are at a distance, say, of 3 feet, are appreciably dimmer than those at the distance of 2 feet, 11 inches. And the result is that by careful and constant experimental observation, comparative dimness and clearness, we are enabled to infer with great exactness the configuration of the object observed. Okay, so the A was, an instance will do more than a volume of generalities to make my meaning clear.
Without applying it to the
yes,
table.
it worked.
Oh yeah, well, everybody's got
Exactly.
Suppose I see two individuals approaching whose rank I wish to ascertain.
Fiance, brother. Exactly. So that's why with is very vague, but still makes the connection.
Now, how about you? How do you know?
So I used to work at nonprofit technology resources.
They are, we will suppose, a merchant and a physician, or in other words, an equilateral triangle and a pentagon. How am I to distinguish them? Oh, the other button's not working. It will be obvious to every child in Spaceland who has touched the threshold of geometrical studies that if I can bring my eye so that its glance may bisect an angle A of the approaching stranger, my view will lie as it were evenly between the two sides that are next to me. Come on.
A couple months ago?
Yeah.
I try doing the speaking, and that way you can focus on.
CA and AB, so that I shall contemplate the two impartially, and both will appear of the same size.
In the case of one, the merchant, what shall I see?
I shall see a straight line, DAE, which the middle point A will be very bright because it is nearest to me, but on either side the line will shade away rapidly to dimness because the sides AC and AB recede rapidly into the fog, what appear to me as the merchant's extremities visualized.
D and E will be very dim indeed. On the other hand, in the case of the gynecologist, though I shall here also see a line with a brilliant center, yet it will shade away less rapidly to dimness because the sides recede less rapidly into the bog, and what appear to me the gynecologist's extremities biz.
D prime and E prime will not be so dim as the extremities of the merchant.
The reader will probably understand from these two instances how, after very long training supplemented by constant experience, it is possible for the well-educated classes among us to discriminate with fair accuracy between the middle and lower orders by the sense of sight. If my Spaceland patrons have grasped this general conception so far as to conceive the possibility of it and not to reject my account as altogether incredible, I shall have attained all I can reasonably expect.
Where I attempt to further details, I should only perplex.
Yet for the sake of the young and inexperienced who may perchance infer, from the two simple instances I have given above, of the manner in which I should recognize my father and my sons, that recognition by sight is an easy affair, it may be needful to point out that in actual life, most of the problems of sight recognition are far more subtle and complex.
If,
for
example,
when
my
father
the
triangle
approaches,
me
he
happens
to
present
his
sight
to
me
instead
of
his
angle
then
until
I
ask have him
to
rotate
or
until
I
have
edged
my
I
around
him
I
and
for
the
moment
moment
doubtful whether
he
may
not
be
a
straight
line
or
in
other
words
a
woman.
Again,
When
I
am
in
the
company
of
one
of
my
two
hexagon
no
what hexagonal
grandsons
contemplating
one
of
his
sides
80
bow
front
it
will
be
evident
from
the
accompanying
diagram
that
I
shall
see
1
O
line
AB
in
comparative
brightness
shading
of
hardly
at
all the
ends
and
two
smaller
lines
CA
and
BD
dim
throughout
and
shading
away
into
greater
dimness
towards
the
extremities
C
and
D. But I must not give way to the temptation of enlarging on these topics. The
meanest
mathematician
in
Spaceland
will
readily leave
me
when
I assert
that
the problems
life
which
themselves
to
well
educated
when
they
are
themselves
in motion,
rotating
advancing
retreating
and
at
same
time
attempting
to
discriminate
the
by
sense
of
sight
between
of
polygons
of high rank
moving in
different
directions.
as for example
In a ballroom or converse, what
Compilation
of a nature to
as the angularity
of the most intellectual,
and amply justify the rich
endowments of the learned professors of geometry
both static and kinetic,
in the illustrious University of Woodbridge,
where the science of art and sight
recognition are regularly taught
to large classes of the elite.
and of the states.
It's only a few of the scion or noblest and wealthiest houses who are able to give the time and money necessary for the thorough prosecution of this noble and valuable art.
Even to me, a mathematician of no mean standing, and the grandfather of two most hopeful and perfectly regular hexagons, to find myself in the midst of a crowd of rotating polygons of the higher classes is occasionally very perplexing.
And of course, to a common tradesman or serf, such a sight is almost as unintelligible as it would be to you, my reader, were you suddenly transported to my country.
In such a crowd, you could see on all sides of you nothing but a line, apparently straight, but of which the parts would vary irregularly and perpetually in brightness or dimness.
Even if you had completed your third year in the pentagonal and hexagonal classes of the university and were perfect in theory of the subject, you would still find there was need of many years of experience before you could move in a fashionable crowd without jostling against your betters, whom it is against etiquette to ask to feel, and who, at their superior culture and breeding, know all about your movements, but you know very little or nothing about theirs. In a word, to comport oneself with perfect propriety in polygonal society, one ought to be a polygon oneself.
Such, at least, is the painful teaching of my experience. It is astonishing how much art, or may I almost call it instinct, of sight recognition is developed by the habitual practice of it and the avoidance of the custom feeling.
With you, I see and feel, and I feel myself in my large testicles. Rabbit testicles are much greater than Great Dane testicles, even though Great Dane testicles have the word great in their name.
For this reason, among our higher classes, feeling is discouraged or absolutely forbidden.